Okay, so let's start with introductions. Who wants to go first? George or Alex?
I guess I can.
All right, George, get after it.
My name is George Titchener. I'm a senior here at Texas Tech, studying IT and marketing. This summer I interned at Facebook, and I'll be going back there June 1st.
Going back to Facebook on June 1st.
Yes.
Awesome. And what's your role going to be there?
I actually don't know yet.
Okay.
I'll find out around December, January.
Okay, perfect. Awesome. Well, Alex, tell us about yourself.
Yeah, I'll do a quick intro for myself. Hi, everyone. I'm Alex. I graduated in 2018. I went to school in New York and now currently work at Facebook. My team is more of a social impact / community protection team. So I've been on that team for the past about 2.5 years and have loved my job so far at Facebook, and I'm excited to talk to you guys too. I'm pretty relatively new to the professional world too, graduated in 2018, so excited to hear your questions and talk to you guys today.
Awesome. Well, good. I guess we got to get the cotton candy questions out of the way first. So what is your favorite thing about working at Facebook?
So definitely my favorite thing prior to COVID was the meals and the amazing, snack kitchens and stuff like that too. Obviously we don't get that now because we're in COVID, but hopefully once we get back to the office, the snacks will be back and the free meals will be back. But it's an amazing community too. I work in our Austin office, and it's been amazing over the past 2 years to meet people, to connect with people who I never would have met any other way. And so Facebook has just been a remarkable experience too, to get to meet people who are similar and have passions for impacting their community and working on really big and complicated challenges too. So currently it's definitely the people, and then probably will be a tie between people and food once we get back to the office in next summer.
Nice. George, what about you?
Well, I have heard a lot about the tacos, but unfortunately I never got to have them. For me, it's really just getting to talk to anyone at Facebook. If I wanted to learn what's going on at Instagram, it's, hey, let me put some time on someone's calendar. I think Alex scheduled like so many meetings for me during the internship on, hey, here's a product marketing manager at Portal. I think you need to go talk to her. It's just so open and everyone's willing to talk just to learn more about what they do or help or questions. That was really incredible.
Awesome. Well, George, we'll just stay with you for a second. What was your journey to Facebook? Tell us a little bit about that.
Oh, man. I started looking for internships like the summer before. I applied to Google, Twitter, Disney Plus, Amazon. I was applying everywhere. Kind of knew I wanted to be in tech, and I knew the roles that I was interested in, either data analytics or product management. After December, I was starting to get a little bit worried. I had thrown a few applications to Facebook. End of November, I hadn't heard anything. I was still waiting on Google, and then right when I got a rejection from Disney Plus, I got an email saying, hey, we want to learn more about you at Facebook. And that kind of started the 3-week process.
Awesome. Perfect. Alex, how about you? How did you get to Facebook?
Yeah, so there were a lot of twists and turns on my journey to Facebook. I had actually never done a tech internship or role before I had applied to Facebook. I've done a lot of work in politics and a lot of work in media. I studied history in college, so I never planned on applying to a role like Facebook, but similar to George, the summer going into my senior year, I just basically applied everywhere and applied to, Google, Adobe, Microsoft, a bunch of different companies, and ended up landing on Facebook, and honestly ended up kind of stumbling upon my role that I currently work in, but it aligns really well with my passion for policy and social impact and protecting communities. So I ended up doing an internship similar to George the summer going into my senior year. had an amazing experience, really, really enjoyed it, felt really passionate about the work that I was doing, and then decided to come back after I graduated too. But like I mentioned, it was actually my first experience in tech, so it was definitely interesting to see the differences between that and media companies I had worked at, like NBC or USA Today. It was a completely different environment than what I was normally used to.
Awesome. Well, Alex, we'll just stay here with you for this next one. I know you have to be careful about what you talk about with Facebook. You can't just tell us all of the things, but what does your typical day look like? And let's set COVID aside. Like, what would your typical day look like normally?
Yeah, I think probably one of the most critical things that happens day to day in our role is just the high amount of collaboration that happens across the company. So, prior to COVID and even during COVID, we work really cross-functionally with all of our offices around the world. We work closely with our offices in Dublin. We work closely with our offices in San Francisco, Menlo Park, California, and New York, DC, across the world. So a typical day could depend on when my first meeting is, but sometimes we get into the office early if we have to meet with our partners in Dublin or different parts of the world. And, a lot of my day usually is meeting with people, synthesizing information, and then really serving as a project manager for a lot of the different projects or different initiatives that we work on. I think, without revealing too much information, but this shouldn't be a surprise to anyone, Facebook is a global company. And so when we create a policy or when we work on a project, we have to think about how that can scale globally and how that can impact the 2 billion people that use our platform. So it's a lot of problem solving, and we have to think about what nuances exist in different regions. We have to think about how policies or protocols or decisions can impact different countries. And so it's a lot of research and engagement on how can we make a policy or how can we create a project that's not just impacting the United States, but that's impacting the entire world. And we work with large teams of people to make sure that we're doing that right and doing that properly.
Very cool. So George, your experience is just a little bit different since you were interning. So what did your typical day look like?
There isn't really a typical day. And as far as like being an intern or a full-time employee, it wasn't like I was an intern and kind of pushed off to the side. It was, hey, here's your intern project, but you're a full-time employee, essentially. We're not going to treat you any different. You figure out where the project needs to go. So if I thought I needed to meet with someone in Dublin, I could just put that on my calendar, go do that meeting first thing in the day. I had that flexibility and that autonomy to really set my project and my work.
Very cool. What do you wish you knew before you started?
I probably wish I knew a bit more SQL before I started. My first few weeks, that's what I was really focusing on, and then started working more with like people and some of my cross-functional partners.
Nice. Alex, what about you? What do you wish that you knew before you started?
Yeah, data is always an asset. I mean, I'll say for those listening who are non-technical or for those who are technical, there are tons of different roles at tech companies. You don't have to have any mastery of a technical skill, but I think what I've learned from Facebook is just knowing how to use data and knowing how to interpret data can always be an asset, even if you're not in a non-technical role. So I think I would have just wanted to have a little bit more background on that, maybe take a course on it or get a certification or something like that. But yeah, I think just data is something that no matter what tech company you work at, it's always nice to have just a little bit of background or a little bit of understanding before you go in.
Awesome. So when you start a new job in a new company, especially at a fast-paced one, it's a challenge. What challenges do you think you specifically had to overcome starting at Facebook?
George, do you want to start, or I can?
Sorry, did I not tell you we're over the cotton candy questions? I didn't say that.
Oh man. for me, I guess, like when I got my 12-week project handed to me, I was like, there's no way I can do this in 12 weeks. Just kind of sitting there thinking of, it's too big. How do I scale this, like Alex is saying, globally to solve not just the one problem, but the 10 problems after it. I just got really comfortable being uncomfortable and just kind of like figuring things out as I went.
I like that, getting comfortable with being uncomfortable. That's good.
Yeah, I think going off of that too, I think imposter syndrome definitely set in the first couple months when I started full-time at Facebook. I think it's easy to look around at a company like Facebook and think that, you know, everyone's really smart, everyone's coming from these amazing backgrounds or these amazing schools. And I think what I had to realize as I was starting out at Facebook is I was selected for this position for a reason, and I brought a unique set of skill sets and I brought a unique background that helped me be successful in the role. And so, yeah, I definitely think imposter syndrome sets in pretty quickly when, you know, when you're in the first couple months of any new job. But I think especially at Facebook too, when you're working with people who are just incredibly smart, I think it's easy to doubt yourself sometimes.
Yeah, but like you said, they hired you for a reason, so that you have to have some confidence in that. Let's see, what kind of mentoring did you receive when you were at Facebook, when you first started?
So I like to adopt a lot of different mentors whenever I'm at a company or doing an internship. And so I had a formal mentor that was assigned to me, but honestly, I started just adopting different mentors as I met people, as I went to different offices, and just stayed in touch to talk about different areas that I was interested in. I think what's nice about Facebook is there's so many people who are willing to support you once you get to the company, not just with your projects, but in your goals, in how you want to develop in your career. And as George said too, people are really open to talking with you and chatting with you too. So I've tried to rope in as many people as possible at Facebook to be my mentor. And, you know, that's included my manager as well. I think I've had 2 managers since I started at Facebook, and they've been great support systems as well as I've continued to progress in my career at Facebook.
Awesome. George, how about you?
Yeah, pretty much the same. I had my intern manager who I'd meet with almost every day, but then I'd reach out to people like Alex, like, hey, Alex, what are you doing? Or other groups or people I just thought, hey, I want to learn more about what they did, or how do they think? Can I get a little bit of insight from that and then file it away in a little folder?
Awesome. Yeah, that's wonderful, especially if you've got somebody that's close to being a peer. That's very helpful, which, by the way, is why we're doing this, because George said, I made it to Facebook and I want to share this with everybody else. So we appreciate that, George. What did you do to separate yourself from the pack? You know, you talked about having to apply to all these different places. What do you think made them choose you out of all of the people?
I guess I can start with this one. It usually starts, I actually had a few like phone calls with some of my recruiters after I'd been hired, just to kind of understand this process a lot more. So what I was told is, let's take Facebook, for example. I think there's about like 50,000 full-time employees. On average, they get about 50,000 applications a week.
Oh, wow.
So the trick is out of that 50,000, maybe only 20% are even qualified, meaning they meet just the minimum qualifications. Well, from there, you really need to get referrals. If you get a referral, you skip that first 20,000 and you're probably in a little bucket of maybe 1,000. So just increasing your odds that much by just reaching out to employees from your school or anyone you think has like an interesting background, you want to learn more about their role, what they do, those little things can help you at least get to the interview stage. From there, it's, well, no, you can go ahead.
No, I was just going to say that's awesome. Keep going.
Yeah, for me, whenever I found out I had the interview, I reached out to a veteran at Facebook who had just gotten hired, and just kind of like, I use this as cheating on a test. But if you have someone who is going to take a finance class at 2 and you're in the 4 o'clock class, you're probably going to ask your friend, hey, what kind of questions were on the test? An interview is just the same thing. All you have to do is figure out what are the types of questions that they're looking for, and then you can prepare to answer those questions and be in the right thought process.
Awesome. Nice. Just to be clear, no one's endorsing cheating. Clear about that.
Yeah.
Alex, I know you are very active in LinkedIn. Do you think that was helpful?
I do. I think, the big thing that I try to advocate with everyone that I help mentor and everyone that I help support is just being as proactive as possible. I think often and I fell into this trap too sometimes when I was in college, but I think it's really easy to just mass apply for a bunch of different things, right? And just apply to, 200 positions and hope that you hear back. But I think what George has done and what I've done as well is really making sure that we're in control of our careers and we're charting our own destinies. And I think as much as possible, if you can use LinkedIn to reach out to alumni at your school that are working at Facebook, Google, Microsoft, any company that you're interested in, that makes a difference. Getting referrals to the companies you're interested in makes a huge difference. Continuing to talk and connect with people at the companies you're interested in to just learn more about their jobs, that's going to help you in the interview process too, because you have a better understanding of the company culture and what's necessary to succeed at the companies. So I think as everyone is thinking about applying for jobs and applying for different positions, the more proactive you can be about connecting with people, reaching out to people, leveraging LinkedIn, leveraging your career center, leveraging alumni networks, you're going to put yourself in a much better place, because honestly, most people don't do that. I would say 99% of people just hit apply and hope that they'll hear back on the role. I think the 1% of people who are proactive, reach out to people, connect with people on LinkedIn, set up virtual introduction calls, those are the people that end up getting interviews. Those are the people that stand out in applications. If you can develop those relationships, you can develop a lot of results for yourself down the road.
Awesome. So what tips do you have for crushing the interview?
Yeah, I think it depends on, it's so hard because your interview is going to look so different depending on what the role is or what position you're applying for. So George and I were on more of a community protection and social impact team. You might interview for a business role, you might interview for a product role. And so the interviews are going to range. But I think the biggest thing I can say is just, as simple as this sounds, read the job description and think about how your experiences tie in. I know that sounds really, really simple, but it makes a huge difference. If you can think about how what you've done on your resume, what you've done in terms of leadership, what you've done in terms of professional opportunities ties in to what the role is actually looking for, that's going to help you knock it out of the park on probably 70 or 80% of questions that you're going to get.
Awesome. George, what advice do you have on the same question?
Yeah, piggybacking off of that, one thing me and Alex talked about is we both are readers. So one of our favorite books is called Cracking the PM Interview. Not everyone wants to be a product manager, and that's fine. I'm not saying go do that. But part of what they teach you is to have a structure to how you answer your questions. And I think any role where you're having to interview, being more structured in your answers can only benefit you as a candidate. No one's going to say you're too structured, we're not going to hire you.
Yeah, that's probably true. What is the best question that you ever asked or that you ever heard asked to an interviewer? You know, when you're in the interview, they always say, well, what questions do you have for us? And you don't want to sit there with nothing in your back pocket to pull out and ask. What's the best question you can think of?
So with Facebook, I had 3 rounds of interviews back to back. So the first one was like the culture. I made sure to ask questions about that. 2 was like the work. On the 3rd one, I ran out of questions. Like I didn't have any more. So that's where you just kind of flip the script. An interview is a 2-way conversation. So they've interviewed you for like the first 20 minutes. You interview them. What's their most challenging day-to-day like priorities they have to do? What do people typically struggle with in this role? You know, flip the script and really figure out the questions you would want to know if you were working there.
Awesome. Alex, how about you?
Yeah, I agree with that. I think, you know, it's interesting. I feel like I have my canned 3 or 4 questions that I ask almost every time if I can't think of anything else. But I think the more you can show depth and research into the role, the better. So, for example, if you were interviewing for a business role at Google and you've done your homework and you've done research on that part of the company and you've spoken with people at the company and you've identified potential problems that they're facing, if you can bring out that research at the end of your interview, again, 99% of people probably aren't going to spend the time doing that. And so I think the more you can show depth and understanding of the company and the role you're applying for, I think the more impressive it's going to be at the end of the interview. You can always ask those canned questions, right, if you freeze up. But I think the more that you can show that you're thinking critically about the company you're at, thinking critically about the role and where it might be headed, I think the better. That shows that you're demonstrating interest in the role and that you've done your homework over the last few weeks as you're preparing for the interviews.
Nice. I hear a lot of preparing, like be prepared. What do you think is the best way to connect with companies? I actually had a student in my office the other day who was saying, should I just call people? Should I just send letters to people? What do I need to do? So what's your best advice for how to connect with companies you're interested in?
I would say definitely start with people who go to your university and are alums and who currently work at the companies you're interested in. George knows this, but I spend way too much time on LinkedIn, but it is a really, really valuable resource. And on LinkedIn, you can find tons of people from your university, from your area, from your high school even, who are currently working at some of the companies that you're interested in too. So I think the best way to connect with a company is do some research and, you know, find alums of your university who are currently working at places you're interested in, and then set up phone calls with them. Not everyone is going to respond or not everyone's going to say yes, but that's literally how I found Facebook and Google and a lot of these companies, was connecting with people who graduated from my school and who works there currently. I think that's a great way to instantly have a common connection with someone if you share a team or an alma mater. And it's a great way to learn more about the companies that you're interested in too. I don't know if Facebook is like receiving letters now, but I would definitely say, like, start with connecting with people on LinkedIn or at your school, even people who are currently upperclassmen who've done internships at the companies you're interested in. Connect with those people too. But I think that's a good way to start and build relationships with people who can help you down the road.
Nice. And you said something on LinkedIn the other day, and I don't want to misquote you, but you said something to the effect of, when you reach out to somebody, don't say, oh, I'm so sorry to bother you, I know you don't have time, or whatever. Can you tell us a little bit about that? Because I thought that was really good.
Yeah, absolutely. So, I think it's important, just like when you're, writing an essay, or just like when you're giving a presentation for class, to be as direct as possible. I think introducing yourself, showing that you might have, a commonality with someone or share an alma mater with someone, and then getting directly to what you'd like or what your goal is really, really important. I think that I've noticed, and previously I feel like I, would over apologize for things, or, kind of talk myself out of, a potential connection or a phone call. But I think it's just really important to be as direct as possible with people. It's okay to say that you want a referral, or you want to intern at a company, or you want a job at a company. That's the purpose of LinkedIn. That's why people are on there. I think 90% of people on LinkedIn admit that they're looking for a job, or they're thinking about, looking for another job. So people know that's why you're sending them a message. But I think as direct as you can be with people, the better, and it'll help you continue to network with people.
Awesome. George, how about you?
Yeah, I can't recommend LinkedIn enough. I started out by sending messages like, hey, I'd love to pick your brain. And similar to the effect that Alex says, you really got to be more direct. Someone's LinkedIn is like a live resume. If you actually look at it and try to find areas where you have commonalities, Alex mentioned like alumni. What if you're a track runner and they were a track runner? That's an instant connection there. For me, being a veteran, I reach out to other veterans because I know they're a lot more likely to respond to me. And this isn't limited to like your veteran or your school. You're just looking for commonalities or experiences you might share. Say y'all were in the same fraternity, you volunteered at the same area or organization. These are all pathways to connect with people. Another way is, I learned this, is there's conferences. Now, a lot of conferences are attended by professionals, but if you're a student who shows up, you're the one student surrounded by a lot of professionals working at companies or fields. So look for the companies you want and say, hey, there's a conference there. Now, this is a little bit more extreme, but go to the conference, connect with everyone there. It can get you to a final round with Disney Plus. Speaking from experience.
Yeah, and I think going off of the common ground point, I mean, I'm not kidding. I have stretched as much as possible to find common ground with people. I talked to one guy a couple weeks ago on Microsoft about our love of hot sauce, and we talked about hot sauce brands, right? I think if you look into people's profiles and you look into people's backgrounds, most of the time you'll be able to find something similar. Maybe you studied something similar. Maybe you also have a passion for tech or journalism or media or something that they've written about. I think it's not as hard as you think to find common ground with people. And what that does is it essentially humanizes the conversation and helps you break the ice a little bit too. I think ultimately in this strange virtual COVID environment, when you're reaching out to people, you don't have the luxury right now of setting up coffee with them in person. And so I think it's nice to have just some icebreaker at the beginning that helps you find a little bit more common ground with someone and start the conversation. It can make a really big difference.
Awesome. Well, I know we have to be careful about the whole Facebook thing, but is there anything interesting or fun or exciting that you can tell us about that's coming soon or that you're working on?
So yeah, I have to be a little bit careful on specifics on projects, but one thing I will say that was really exciting about this year was being an intern manager. So I was a manager for the first time and got to manage a Facebook intern over the summer. I'm interested in people management and people development. So I worked with my manager and my director on transitioning into more of a people management role over the summer. And so that was a great opportunity to get to see basically the other side of what it's like to manage an intern and be in charge of their professional growth and development. So that was a great experience that I just wrapped up over the summer too. And a little meta also because I was a Facebook intern and then became a Facebook intern manager, but it was a great experience.
Awesome. George, what about you?
I don't think I'm really allowed to talk about like what I worked on, but one cool thing is people are always reaching out looking for like people to help with projects they have going on. So I was like able to do consumer research for Facebook Campus, which just came out like a week ago. So it's cool seeing that be live.
Awesome. Well, George, you were going to tell us a little bit about Facebook University. Is that what you called it, I think?
Yeah, so Facebook has internships for freshmen and sophomores. It's an 8-week internship that can be engineering, analytics, operations, uh, marketing, and sales. I think that's it, right, Alex?
Yeah, those are the main areas.
8 weeks. It's a really good chance if you can get in to learn a lot, and then at the end of the internship, you can actually get a return offer for the next summer.
Nice.
Those just opened up, like some of them. Today, they'll be opening up for mid-October.
Yeah, I would say too, if you're interested in Facebook or Google or Microsoft or tech companies, keep checking their career page this month and next month. They are notorious about opening internships ridiculously early. So a lot of companies will open them up either right now or in the next probably 3 or 4 weeks. So keep refreshing the pages every couple weeks too, because yeah, they typically start pretty early for their full-time university hiring, and then their internships for sophomores and juniors respectively too.
Awesome. So just go to Facebook
Hmm?
careers.com. Like, okay.
Yeah,
Yeah,
fb.com/careers.
Okay.
yeah, and in the search bar, you can just hit intern and filter to just all US, and all internships will pop up.
Very cool. Awesome. Well, let's open up the floor to some questions. Who has any questions? People out there, you can put them in the chat bar or you can unmute. Those of you who are veteran, oh, there's Malcolm, go ahead.
I have a question. Alex, you spoke a lot about mentoring. I just had a question. How did you initiate those relationships, or what advice do you have approaching someone and to kind of start that mentee-mentor relationship?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think what's been helpful for me is that there are those formal channels of mentorship, right? When you get to a company, you're assigned a mentor. There are mentorship programs when you're in college. And so those are easy, right? Because that person is assigned to be your mentor. But I think for the informal ones, I think what's been helpful is, I never explicitly will say, hey, can you adopt me and, become my mentor? But I will develop a relationship with people where I'm consistent about checking in with them. With a couple mentors I have at Facebook, I try to meet with them every 2 or 3 months, and I'll just put a meeting on their calendar so that we can consistently check in. I'm intentional about updating them about what I'm doing with my career or areas I want to grow in. And so I think the best piece of advice I can give, if you want an informal mentor, you want to add mentors, is just be consistent about checking in with them and connecting with them and asking for advice when you need advice. I think that's been something that I've tried to do as much as possible in Facebook and outside of Facebook, is find those people who reflect my values, who reflect my career interests, and then I just keep checking in with them. And that way I develop a relationship with them, and I can continue to show them how I'm developing in my career and show them how I'm continuing to grow.
Thank you. Thank you so much. That was really good. Thank you.
I got a question. So there's a lot of misinformation online right now, and I know Facebook is starting to do new things to start combating it. So how has your department been affected by this, if any?
Yeah, that's a good question. So I would say our team specific. So to zoom out a little bit, Facebook has about 1,000 employees that work under a division called Global Operations. And basically what Global Operations does is they work to keep the platform safe for our users. They work to help protect people, as George mentioned, too, not just in the United States, but around the world. And so within global operations, we have specific teams that are just designated to solving issues on misinformation or in that area. So I can't speak too much to what those teams are specifically working on just because I'm not on that team. But I will say, I think, a top priority that Facebook has set out since probably 2016 over the last 4 years has been, making sure that we're thinking critically about these problems. We also do have teams that just focus on external engagement at the company. So we have teams specifically in charge of working with academics, professors, working with NGOs, government agencies, and nonprofits on handling these issues as well. So again, I'm not on that team, so I can't specifically talk about what they do day to day, but I'll say that we handle this problem from many different aspects. We engage people externally. We have internal teams who work on this. We have technical teams that think about how automation can solve these problems. So there's a lot of different ways that we're handling this. Our team specifically isn't under that umbrella, but we do have a lot of different teams that are focusing on these issues and working to solve these issues too.
Cool. Jordan?
Y'all talked about how y'all can basically like set meetings with different people in Facebook that may not be on a project that you're working on. Are y'all allowed to kind of, if that project may be tangential to what you're doing for Facebook or anything like that, hop on to other projects while you're working there?
If there's a business reason for you to hop on there.
Yeah, I mean, kind of. Yeah, I think what's interesting is, because Facebook is such a collaborative environment, if you're working on a team that focuses on policy, right, and there are 50 other people who are working on similar issues or issues that are adjacent to the projects that you're working on, it's pretty common that you'll collaborate with those people or work on different projects with those people. I think that being said, if you're on a sales team and you decide that you want to work on, an engineering project or something, it's probably not going to overlap. You're probably going to have to switch teams, or apply to a different role within the company. But I'll say that, especially within our division and a lot of teams at Facebook, there's just so much overlap between what teams are working on, what different offices are doing, that yeah, there's a lot of opportunity for collaboration. There's a lot of potential for working on different projects or getting pulled into different projects too. So it definitely has happened a few times where I've been interested in something or worked closely with someone on something, and that's turned into a new opportunity, or that's turned into a new project that we've worked on together.
Alex, earlier you mentioned data. You wish you had more experience with that. But I just wanted to ask, what skills are held in highest regard for Facebook interns?
I think that's a good question. I mean, unless you're applying to a software engineering role at Facebook, you're probably fine on data. I think the biggest thing that we emphasize within internships, and George, chime in if you want to add to this, but I would say project management is most important. We want people who can own a project from start to finish and work with necessary teams who can think critically about the information that's being presented, and then present that and come up with solutions on how we want to move forward and how we want to solve the problem. So
yeah,
go ahead, George.
Yeah, I was gonna say is like I was the only technical intern out of the 4 interns on the team. The other 3 were political science majors for the most part. Facebook doesn't really seem to hire based on technical talent, they care more about how quickly you can learn things. Throughout the internship, it was, hey, we don't care that you don't know how to use Presto. It's, can you learn it within the 12 weeks that you're here?
Yeah, and I think where data comes in is really just, you can take a more data heavy role at Facebook, and so that can flex your skill sets, right? But I think where data comes in is just understanding data when you're working on a project or when you're in that environment. And a lot of that just comes from experience, honestly. There's, I kind of looked back at my experience in college and thought, was there a class I could have taken, or was there, a certain, learning module that I could have taken? Not really, but I think as you're thinking about internships or different on-campus opportunities, it's helpful to have internships or opportunities where you're at least interacting with data, right? I think that makes you more comfortable leading projects where you have to use data to back up your arguments. That helps you be more comfortable in an environment like Facebook. So I don't want anyone to leave this conversation thinking that you have to like take a bunch of coding classes or something. You don't. I studied history. I had a non-technical background and got a role at Facebook. But I do think the more that you can, maybe work on a side project or do an internship where you're in that environment, where maybe you're at a startup or you're at, a company that deals with data, or you're at a company that deals with software, the more you can be in that environment, the more comfortable you'll be. And I think that's something that, over the first few months at Facebook, I started to pick up pretty quickly. But, having that background of being in those environments never hurts. It will only help you as you're moving into an environment like Facebook or Google or Microsoft or a different tech company.
Thank you. That was really in-depth. I appreciate it.
We got a question here from Jonathan. It says, Alex and George, you mentioned that if you wanted to go learn something different, you can contact different department leads and managers. Is there anything else Facebook does to support employees as they look to grow and level up their skills and responsibilities?
Yeah, Facebook's biggest thing is your whole career. Your manager isn't there to just manage whatever org that he's in charge of. He's managing each of his employees as well. Their whole job is to really direct you in the career that you want. As an intern, I was on the markets team, but I didn't have to hide the fact that, hey, I'm interested in product management. My manager would be like, okay, hey, here's 5 people I know who have made this transition. I want you to go connect with them and find out more about their experience. If you wanted to move teams, which I saw a few employees do that during the course of my internship, your manager will look for opportunities to work with those teams so you can get the skills to move into those roles. I'm gonna say, Alex, if you want to add on.
Yeah, I agree with that. I think, Facebook in terms of training too definitely offers any resource you could possibly think of. If you want to advance in technical skills, if you want to advance in project management skills, if you want to learn interviewing skills, if you want to learn basically any skill, we have a course for it internally. But I think as far as your day-to-day job is concerned, George is exactly right. You can really create the path that you want at Facebook. It's not uncommon that people would work at Facebook for 6 years and have 5 different roles. It's pretty typical. I think people are pretty fluid. They move around to different teams and different roles based on their interests, based on their passions. It's okay to have honest conversations with your manager where you explain where you want to grow in your career, where you want to develop. So I think that's kind of a secret weapon that Facebook has that's unique to tech culture in general. I think we are really open to helping people grow and helping people develop. We want you to find a role that you enjoy and that you can see yourself in and be successful in. And I think what's nice about the division I work in too, we almost encourage you to find projects and to find work that fits your passion. And if you're really passionate about policy, or if you're really passionate about a certain area of the company, we often will let you explore those passions and explore those interests too. So we really do try to make sure that people are enjoying their roles and having a positive experience at the company. And there's such an open environment that helps support people do that as well.
I have a question.
Go ahead, Jimmy.
So I'm just wondering, with the whole Facebook thing you guys have been talking about, do you guys have like more room for learning? Like, do you guys offer your employees like classes if they want to learn more skills and they want to maybe take like a CPA license? Do you guys would you guys like, you know, sponsor them in that, you know? Just that kind of question.
So, yeah, that's a great question. Yeah, there are a ton of internal classes that we have that will help you in technical skills, project management skills. We have training specifically on diversity and inclusion. We have trainings around fostering a better management environment. So we have tons of trainings that will help you advance in your career or become a people manager or things like that. I'm not as familiar with our support of certifications or additional classes, but internally, if you're an employee at Facebook, we'll make sure that you're incredibly successful no matter what career path you want to pursue, or if you want to get more technical, or if you want to become a manager someday or something like that. So we do offer a lot of resources for people who are interested in developing in those areas too.
Awesome. And we have a question from John. How is the work-life balance with Facebook? Excuse me. For some reason, I think it takes up a lot of your free time more than other jobs would.
George, do you want to start?
Yeah, I'm just trying to think of what I should say. I mean, so I can probably say this now that I have an offer, but like during the time I had a lot of free time just because I was focused only on my project. I was able to do summer classes with one laptop here and my work laptop here going back and forth. That's an extreme case and it wasn't too bad. As far as like the other employees from what I saw, it's usually about a 40-hour work weeks. Fridays, people usually dip out around like 2 in the afternoon. If you don't have meetings, then do your job. And if you're done, you're done.
Yeah, I agree with that. I think it really does boil down to each person having personal accountability. I'll be honest, when I first got to Facebook, I thought that the way to move up in my career was to just grind and be the one who was at the office at like 7 o'clock, 7:30. And pretty early on, my manager had a conversation with me and said, "Why are you doing this? This is not necessary." And I think that after I realized that, you know, I could leave the office at 4:30 or 5 o'clock, or, you know, if I had a doctor's appointment or something, I could leave early for the day. Once I realized that Facebook was more concerned with your results and the work that you were doing and less concerned about who's staying at the office latest or who's getting in early or who's answering emails on the weekend. Once I realized that my managers actively discouraged that, I think I started to have a very normal work-life schedule. I would say, you know, each week, I agree with George, I think it's about 40 hours. Of course, there are some weeks that are lighter than others or busier than others, but Facebook really does actively encourage people to work normal schedules. You're not rewarded for working over 40 hours, and your managers and your directors are consistently thinking about your resilience, your mental health, and your life outside of Facebook. So I think it's been really, really nice to see that across the company, people really do prioritize their families, their lives outside of Facebook. It's not something that consumes your weekends. It's not something that consumes your life after 5 or 6 p.m.
Awesome.
That was really helpful. Thank you.
It says, Keegan says, would any of you be available as a personal resource for exploring Facebook as a career opportunity?
Yes.
Yeah.
Pretty sure that's why they're here.
Yeah, feel free to connect with us, or I'll send my email out too. But yeah, we're definitely happy to be resources for you guys as you explore at Facebook and just explore your careers in general too.
Awesome. And Jinju says, what are some possible promotions you guys could move up to in the company? And how often do people get promoted?
Yeah, that's a good question. So my answer for this is kind of boring. It honestly depends. It really does. I think, depending on what role you're in, what team you're on, promotions can really vary across the company. But I think what's nice about Facebook, and I found this in my 2 years too, is that Facebook is less focused on kind of the promotion structure and more on how you want to develop in your career. And so I've consistently had conversations with my manager about what it would look like to be a manager at the company, or what it would look like to be on, a different social impact team at the company. So I think we're more concerned about what you're finding enjoyable and what you're passionate about at the company. I have received a promotion since I started at Facebook 2 years ago, but I think we're more focused on individually growing you to a point where you're really, really super happy with your career and you're super happy with how you're developing and how you're growing. And so I think we think about career growth in two different ways. One is the very formal way, which is promotions, which I do think Facebook is fair about how they allocate promotions and give promotions. But I think what we try to emphasize more of is how are we matching you with projects and opportunities and potential roles that are going to be great fits for you and are going to make you really excited about the work that you're doing and the projects that you're working on. So we think about it in two different ways.
Very cool. Okay, for a senior who would not be able to intern with Facebook before graduation, what would your recommendation be to stand out amongst the other applicants, especially those who have interned with Facebook?
Yeah, great question. So we hire tons of people who have never interned at the company before. So I would say on my team, probably 70% or 80% of people who are on my team currently didn't have an internship at the company. So that's great news. We actively are looking for people with different experiences and different backgrounds. I think to stand out during the application process, definitely get a referral. And like George and I mentioned earlier, I think be as proactive as possible as you can on LinkedIn, at your university, and just reach out to as many people as possible. I think that really does make a huge difference if you can connect with 3, 4, 5 people who are working at the companies that you're interested in and set up phone calls with them and chat about their experience. That makes a huge difference. So yeah, we definitely hire tons of people who have not interned at Facebook previously. The George and I are a little biased because we did an internship there, but tons of people that I work with never interned at Facebook or had any previous work experience at Facebook too. So it's definitely possible to get a position even if you haven't done an internship.
Yeah, Facebook Austin is hiring like crazy.
Yeah, that's their new building, isn't it?
Yeah,
They have like 6 buildings in Austin, but
yeah,
Austin itself has been.
Yeah, we've grown super quickly in Austin. We ironically we opened up a building right before COVID hit, so that one has really not been used that much. But yeah, we have a couple buildings in Austin, and yeah, the Austin office is actively hiring. Our headquarters in Menlo Park, California, is actively hiring. We're growing pretty quickly as a company, so yeah, definitely encourage you guys to look at potential roles.
Okay, this one may be above your pay grade. How has Facebook responded to the recent congressional hearing on big tech?
I don't have an exact response to that. I mean that is above my pay grade. I think I will say this. I think, one thing I'll point out about working at Facebook or working at any large tech company is I do think you have to kind of get used to the fact that your company is going to be in the news a lot, right? And I think that was different than a lot of places I've worked at or internships that I had previously. I think the level of visibility and the level of attention that companies like Facebook or Microsoft or Amazon gets is something that's kind of part of the role. And so, I think with that question, I would just say, if you're considering, a tech company, Facebook, Google, Microsoft, Amazon, just think about, how much they appear in the news too. I don't have any specific insights on kind of the congressional hearings, or I don't have any insider information, but I will say it's interesting. A couple of the questions that have been brought up today have been about, Facebook in the news. And so I think to people considering those companies, just, kind of remember that, your family members might ask you about it, or, your friends might ask you about it too. That's been something that's kind of part of the role too.
And hopefully don't hold you personally responsible.
Yeah, no, I don't think so.
With COVID making things virtual, what has Facebook done to accommodate? And are there any ways to socialize within the company virtually?
Yeah, that's a great question. So I think what I realized as I was talking to friends and peers who work at different companies, outside of Facebook, I think I realized that, Facebook was set up pretty well to be virtual. Even when we were in the office, we did a lot of virtual meetings and would go into rooms and Skype with people in Dublin, or Skype with people in San Francisco, or Skype with people in New York. It's a pretty global company. And so I think we've always been used to, talking with someone over a screen. It's often, even before COVID, it was probably, 30% of my day or 40% of my day, just because we have so many different offices in so many different places. I think the COVID adjustment specifically, has been a challenge sometimes for everyone, just because, you can't see your friends every day. You don't have that aspect of getting lunch with someone, or getting coffee with someone. But I think as much as possible, we've tried to continue the social aspect, and having, movie nights, or having more social team meetings, or, connecting with people more often. I think we've tried to be more intentional as a company about doing that, to keep culture up and just to keep morale up. But it is different. I mean, there's no perfect way to maintain friendships and maintain relationships in COVID. But, I think the good news is, our company, and I think a lot of tech companies, were pretty prepared to just go completely virtual, because we are tech companies and we do work with people from around the world. And so I think we've adapted pretty smoothly, and really tried to, as much as possible, in terms of financial resources and in terms of just manager resources, we've tried to support employees as much as we possibly can during this period, because we do realize that people have families, people have different living situations. So I think managers have been super empathetic as we've worked from home, and as we've continued to work on projects, and go through, technical difficulties, or go through any, roadblocks that we're facing over the course of COVID.
Very good. Who else has a question? Oh, there's one. Okay, assuming that you or some of your coworkers have worked for other companies within the tech world, or even companies not in tech specifically, what are some of the biggest differences between Facebook and those companies, and what makes Facebook stand out?
Yeah, that's a good question. I think it's hard. I mean, I think a lot of the big tech companies have similar vibes, honestly. I think, Google and Microsoft and, Salesforce and kind of the bigger tech companies do kind of have similar environments. The offices kind of look the same, and there's, snack kitchens and lunch served at a lot of different tech companies. I think what makes Facebook specifically stand out to me, though, is, compared to a lot of the work that I was doing in media and a lot of the work that I was doing in government, I think Facebook feels a lot less like there's, a hierarchy of people, or, a rigid structure. I think it's very easy for you to, work at Facebook and work with someone who's, 5 levels above you, or who's a manager, or who's a director. It's pretty fluid. There's no sense of status, or no, hierarchy that impacts the work that you're doing, which is really nice, right? You want to work with people as your equal, and you want to be in conversations where your ideas are taken seriously and your projects are taken seriously too. And so I think that's been something that's really stood out about Facebook, is just that there isn't this, you know, I had one internship in government that I did in DC where it was very rigid, and, you know, I had to get permission if I wanted to, you know, talk to a manager or meet with someone. And Facebook's just not like that. It's a very open culture. People want to help you, people want to support you. And I think that's been something that's been really nice over the last 2 years. I just feel very open when communicate with people or connect with people. It's an environment where people really want to help you, and there's not any sense of, you know, structure or hierarchy or titles or anything like that.
Awesome. Well, who else has a question? Nobody at all. Dr.
Okay.
Mitchell, you didn't come prepared?
I do have questions, but I'm sitting here in my house and the garbage truck's going by right now. So I was trying to wait like 15 seconds so that you didn't hear all this background noise. So, yeah, so I'm grateful, George and Alex, for you guys coming on, presenting to our students, answering their questions. We got a lot of great students. I'm our internship advisor. So I'm always wanting to make sure that, you know, that our students are, one, presenting themselves well, but that we're getting good companies for our students to get hired at. So, you know, for me, yeah, I wonder what else we can do to get more tech alums at Facebook. And, you know, I know, Alex, you weren't one, but you like George enough, and we got more people like George. So, you know, what can we do? And this is maybe me just thinking more programmatic, but I work with Barbara on this. Like, what can we do to make sure that we get more Texas Tech students as interns and full-time hires at companies like Facebook?
I could answer some of this, I think. I reached out to a lot of the recruitings. A big thing is a lot of these target schools where they have on-campus recruiting do two things. Clubs like AITP, for example, having one member who's been through this interview process and understands it well can teach it to 30, 40 students. These students will take all of the knowledge that they learn and will get into either the same companies or similar companies. And they keep feeding this information back into the club. Now, like we were talking about with like referrals, anyone in this club who's a current student the club should have a directory of everyone, every alumni, where they worked, if they were in the club, and be able to just reach out to them to get those referrals. As an intern at Facebook, I think I had like 60, 80 referrals I could just give out. And full-time employees have that similar number, just 80 referrals they can throw out a year. Most full-time employees, even interns, are willing to do that because if you're successful, that's at least $1,000 extra in their pocket just for giving your resume to a recruiter.
Yeah, I think I would definitely suggest too, this is a great question. It's interesting, my university, NYU, also didn't really have a partnership with Facebook before, you know, I and a couple other people started working there and interning there too. But, you know, I would definitely say, you know, leverage your alumni network as much as possible and bring people to campus and do events like this, because it really does make a difference. The only reason that I knew that Facebook existed and had internships was because I randomly met someone while I was studying abroad and they had done an internship at Facebook. And so I think events like this can really make a huge difference in just people's understanding of how they navigate the internship space. And simply put, this will help people understand that, you know, people can do internships and can do entry-level roles at Facebook too. So I think, you know, the more you can connect with alumni who work at Microsoft and Google and a lot of these places and get them to speak to students, I think the better. It'll make a huge difference in just demystifying, I think, the process, and just demystifying, a lot of, misconceptions that people might have too about, requirements, or, if they need to be technical or not. I think it can make a huge difference.
Thank you. So I get to now put on my professor / internship advisor hat and talk to each of the students here. So both George and Alex have given you some great, counsel and great advice here. And a little bit earlier, they actually, in answering a question, basically said, yeah, we'll be referrals for you. So if you are at all interested in Facebook, you got two people right here who, if you haven't already, while we've been sitting here in this conversation, reach out on LinkedIn to them, get connected. And, if Facebook's interesting to you, start the process, do the homework, as they've said. Thanks, guys.
Yeah, absolutely.
The internship opens in October, is that right?
It's
generally.
Yeah, generally around October. I suggest once it hits October 1st, just tab the page and just refresh it every couple of days or every week or so. Yeah, we'll start kind of sprinkling out different internships and different job postings too. So yeah, just kind of keep that Facebook page, tabbed or open so you can keep checking in.
Awesome. We had another question. I have a final question. Doesn't have to be a final question. Do you have any advice for a student graduating in December? Could be job hunt related or otherwise.
Use your networks we've been talking about. Figure out where you want to work, the roles, and reach out to people in those roles or companies you're interested in, and try and get referrals. It will help you a lot with the interview process.
Yeah, I would say definitely start right now. Start, it doesn't have to be 100 applications or mass applying to a bunch of places, but I think, start that groundwork now. Reach out to 5 or 10 alumni who work at companies you're interested in. Set up those introduction phone calls with people. Start applying to roles in, middle of October. I think the more that you can do the groundwork now over the next 3 or 4 weeks, the better and less chaotic it's going to be, in December when you're graduating too. So definitely encourage you to start early. Make a list of maybe 10 companies that you want to work at, and then start thinking about how you can use your career center, your alumni network, your friends, your resources to get in touch with people at those companies. It'll make a huge difference, 3 months from now when you're graduating.
Yeah. Also, don't just be hung up on Facebook. Amazon's roles are going to be opening up soon. Google Bold will open up in probably a week or two. Go apply to any companies you're interested in.
Yeah, I agree with that too. I know this is a Facebook session, but yeah, I mean, there's so many amazing tech companies. There's great in Austin too. There's great startups. There's great companies that are expanding quickly. So definitely, cast a wide net on the places you're interested in and the places you're looking at. I feel like I learn about a new tech company every single day that's doing something cool or that's doing something amazing. So, definitely, don't limit yourself to just big tech companies. Think about startups, think about all different types of tech environments if that's what you're interested in.
And
Go ahead, George.
I was gonna say, lastly, I've had a few students ask me this before. I was like, they're interested in Google or something, but they're scared of going to California for an internship. A lot of these major companies provide housing for interns, or if they don't, they have a housing arrangement where you can get cheap housing and still make money during your internship. So don't be scared to go to another state for a summer. It's a great opportunity.
And Andrew wants to know, can you tell us about some interesting tech startups?
Yeah, so if you, Oh, I feel like I'm most familiar with the ones in the Austin area, but if you, I can send some resources that kind of list different Austin startups. But I think what I would say is that's where your network comes into, right? If you stay in touch with friends, or if there are Texas Tech alumni that you're looking at, as you're browsing different people's LinkedIn profiles, I think that's where a lot of it comes into. And that's how I've discovered a lot of places that are growing or expanding. Robinhood is a great example of that. But yeah. I'll send a link out with kind of some ideas if you're interested in tech startups. But like George has been saying, I think start with your network and kind of look at where people are working, where people interned and stuff like that. And that will be a good way to get different ideas too.
Anybody else have any questions?
Okay.
I guess not. Okay. Well, thanks to everybody for being here. George and Alex, do you have anything you want to add? Last thoughts?
No, I think we kind of closed a lot of it out. Good luck.
Yeah, good luck to everyone. And the final thing I'll say too is feel free to connect with both of us on LinkedIn. I have a very generic name. It's Alexander Smith on LinkedIn. I will be the one wearing a bow tie in my profile picture, so that's how you'll be able to find me. But yeah, feel free to connect with us on LinkedIn and keep in touch with us too. We're more than happy to help you as your career searching or you're navigating within your career, to happy to answer any questions along the way, even if it's non-Facebook related. Happy to support you guys in your journey. And yeah, it was great talking with you all.